Good morning, everyone, for today's distinguished webinar series in AI and Cyber. Today's distinguished speaker is Dr. J. Todd McDonald. The title of the talk is Applied Machine Learning and Nonlinear Methods for Cybersecurity. Dr. Todd is a director for Center for Forensics, Information Technology and Security and is a professor of computer science in the School of Computing at the University of South Alabama in Mobile, Alabama. Dr. McDonald is active at USA as the principal investigator for the NSF Cyber Cops Scholarship for Service Program and NSA Centers of Academic Excellence Community, as well as being the primary sponsor for USA's Day Zero Cyber Competition student organization. His research interests extend to software and hardware protection, systems assurance, malware detection, and machine learning applications in security. Dr. McDonald is a retired Air Force Cyber Operations Officer, former faculty member of the Air Force Institute of Technology, and a senior member of both ACM and IEEE. Dr. Todd, thank you so much for being here. This is a distinct honor for us, for you to spend your time with us. The floor is yours, and let's get started.
All right. Well, thank you all for the invitation. I surely appreciate it, and good to get to know some other folks in the community. So appreciate the chance to share a few things with what we're doing down here at South Alabama, and let you all be a little bit more familiar with a few things we're doing. So I'll get going here, and I know I like to talk, unfortunately, as most teachers do. So I'll try to limit some things I say, but this talk is as you said, about applied machine learning and nonlinear methods for cybersecurity. So a lot of this comes probably from the last, I'd say, 10 years of work that since I've been here working with other faculty at South. And obviously, a lot of this work is published. So any given little small thing I might mention, is a 15-minute talk in and of itself. So I'll try to give you a highlight of some things we're doing in the area, just to give you a flavor. And hopefully that'll generate some interest from maybe faculty or students going forward. So I'll just tell you a bit about who we are at the beginning here in terms of the university and the School of Computing, a little bit about our research faculty, just so you know, and then get into really the applied areas that we've been looking at, and also introduce maybe something you're not familiar with called nonlinear dynamics. We're using that, or at least that's been one of my main research areas for almost 14 years now, and so I'll share that with you. So just so you know, we are in the very tip of Alabama on the Gulf of America now, and Mobile Bay is right there. We survived a lot of hurricanes that skirt us, and I haven't had too much trouble since I've been here. But we just had our 60-year anniversary not too long ago. We're about 15,000 students roughly. Have about 11 colleges and schools. We're an R2 university. We've done a lot of studying internally at the university on how to maybe reach R1 in the years ahead. And so as a lot of universities, we've got that kind of in mind. We have a pretty big campus, actually, and have done a lot of building renovations. And we just built a campus stadium a couple of years ago that's been a popular hit. And I always like to just mention to other colleagues that, this is called the Beach, that little segment of land there that's right on the Gulf. It's very beautiful, not a bad diversion for faculty and students. But if you like the water, Mobile is definitely the place to be. So I'm in the School of Computing. We're about 700 students, mostly undergrad, obviously. We've got about 30 PhD students in the program currently and 100 master students. We've got a computer science and an information systems technology department and about 25 faculty. We've got traditional ABET accredited undergrad degrees in CS, IT, and IS. Also have a health informatics program. We just broke our master's program out into 3 delineated degrees for CS, cybersecurity, and IS a couple years ago. And our doctoral program has been going now for almost 9-10 years. I think 2017, 2016 is when it got kicked off. And that is a multidisciplinary degree in computing that leverages a lot of our faculty and skills. I'm the director, like I say, for the Center for Forensics, Information Technology Security. I kind of oversee a couple of different missions. One is research development for faculty opportunities. Some of that takes the form partnerships, as you can imagine, with Department of Defense or government agencies, sometimes traditional grant programs, NSF and otherwise. Also run a K-12 STEM outreach program with partner schools in the local area. Help manage our industry partnerships. That takes on the form of internship opportunities, contracted software development work that students participate on in our advisory board that comes from industry. And then we also have an interest in workforce development, obviously. I see kind of our cyber competition club as really a main focus of that, because that's really hands-on skills for a lot of students that want cybersecurity careers, and you're probably not going to do better than the competition world that's out there currently. And of course, women in cybersecurity, we're a big supporter of WESIS. We have been a Center of Academic Excellence in Cyber Defense. We'll get renewed in 27 for that. We've been in that community since around 2010. So we're well familiar with a lot of that community and a lot of the goals. We just got our research designation, and that'll get renewed in 28 now. And I think we were in Dallas when we got awarded our certificate, when y'all were, if it was a year or so ago. And we do have an NSF Scholarship for Service Cyber Scholars Program. That will, we'll have to get that renewed, but that one will currently end in 27. Those typically run 5 years. We're a site that participates in NSF Insure. If you're not familiar with that, let me know. I'll be glad to share what we know about it with you. And then we also are a member of a IUCRC, that's an industry university cooperative research center. And we're actually a member of one called CARS, that's the Center for Advanced Research in Forensic Science. So we bring kind of the digital side to that. But a lot of the folks in that, university-wise, do kind of what you think of the CSI, more classic forensics, blood, bullets, drugs, all kind of things in that area. So research faculty here, I'm one of many that focus on what you would call cybersecurity. And then we have a lot, I would say, actually, we're probably stronger in the data science side of the house, to be honest with you, in the last couple of years. We've grown considerably in terms of just faculty that are doing lots of things with applied machine learning and AI in different areas. And so we found a natural place where those two can get married up, and I'll kind of share some of that with you. I will mention one of my other areas is what I would call systems protection or exploitation. So there's some kind of words to kind of help you think about what both those words mean. But you're either on the analysis side, right, of a piece of software, right? That's the exploitation side. A lot of that sometimes looks like reverse engineering. It could be whether you're doing malware detection or analysis, side channel analysis, or you're on the protection side of that, where you're trying to prevent somebody from doing that. So it's kind of fun to be on both sides of that coin. And there's all types of research, like I say, in that area, but we've had a research group going for about 10 years in that. I'll give you a couple plugs. We've actually ran a mini track at HICS, if you're not familiar with HICS. Great location. The H stands for Hawaii. It's been in Hawaii for, I don't know if 85 is the 85th year. It may be. It's so old. But I run a mini track in cyber operations, defense, and forensics mini track with Dr. Brad Wilson out of Louisiana Tech. That's a great place if you're looking for a publishing opportunity. And then I'm also the co-editor-in-chief for ACM Digital Threats Research and Practice. So this is really, in terms of ACM, you have TISIC and DTRAP are really the two primary security-focused journals. We are a gold open access journal. What that basically means is that all the articles are open access. There is a fee, but pretty much if you ask for the fee to be waived, it'll be waived. And so basically it's voluntary. The fee is voluntary for the open access charge, if you're not familiar with that. And if you're not also know this, ACM will probably be moving all of its journals to gold open access in the next 5 to 6 years. We're one of the first 10 or so that ACM has. But we really are, that one is a venue that tries to bridge the gap between academic research and industry practice. That's kind of the hallmark of it. If you have more information about that, just let me know. I'd be glad to share it with you. Like I said, I'm here to talk about really the overlap between machine learning and cybersecurity. So obviously, if you've been in the machine learning area, you're familiar with the classical questions that machine learning is good at answering in terms of classification or detection. And we're talking about traditional supervised machine learning algorithms that you may be familiar with. There's lots of them out there, decision trees, random forest, neural networks fall in that category, convolutional neural networks. And then you have kind of new versions of those autoencoders and deep learning that have grown out of that in the probably last 5, 6, 7, 8 years. So just some examples of the last 5 to 6 years, we've taken advantage of rare action rules, sub-ensemble learning for the handling of missing classifier ensemble members, classifying Android applications, repackaged Android app classification, distributed file system, digital forensic triage, just as a smattering. And I'll go into a few more of these in specific. So that's actually, if you kind of looked over some of our publication history and research projects that are currently going on, we've actually done something in every one of these areas in terms of applying machine learning research. I may be a lot similar to many security faculty in the sense that I am not a machine learning expert. I use machine learning, and I've had to use machine learning now, and I sit back on some days and wonder what I used to do, years ago before we had machine learning, because I was in the cybersecurity area. But now almost everything we do has a cybersecurity flavor. So I'll kind of share a few things with malware, software vulnerabilities, and system attestation, just to give you a flavor of some of the research questions and areas we're interested in. So in the malware side, that's probably the biggest area in terms of just student and faculty involvement in terms of projects. When you talk about malware detection, you're either talking about basically static or dynamic approaches, whether you're analyzing code or analyzing behavior at runtime. And so those are actually 8 different flavors of malware detection that we have applied machine learning to. And I'll go through a couple of these. But if you see a word that interests you, reach out to me and talk to me. We do have a lot of, like I say, most of these areas have a published paper behind them that you could find and read. But be glad to discuss any of these topics offline if you're interested in specifics of the things we've done. Just to give you an example, if you're familiar with the Android world, obviously programs come in the form of what are called APKs. They're basically just glorified zip files, but within that you have everything an Android application needs to run. We started out really in this whole area of machine learning and cyber with discovering that really, if you looked across commercial and research antivirus, their kind of rate of detecting something that was 0-day was just horrible. It was very easy to get something that hasn't got a signature identified with it out there for a while at least. And so that kind of got us going down the road, and we kind of started with things that were part of the APK, in particular like the Android manifest file. That's just a text XML file. We started out with that, and we did traditional things that people would do. We picked classifiers to run them against. We, like I say, created a data set, started out, we basically got reasonable results. We wouldn't call them great compared to some things we're doing now. But it got us going down the road is the main point. And we were focused again on, every Android app has permissions that somebody has to grant them. So we just started out with that as an analysis, and that got us going down the road. A lot of things that we've done recently, I've been intrigued in this area of what I would call image-based analysis. This is where you can convert binary code or convert lots of things. We've discovered, you can convert packet data into an image form. We focused on converting the Android DEX file, which is the actual binary. Like I say, it's kind of Java-like. DEX is. And then doing some type of image feature extraction from those images, and then using machine learning to classify whether something was normal or something was malware. So, like I say, we started out with DEX images to start with, and we really focused on a particular area that's problematic with Android. It's called repackaged apps. And those are, like I say, one of the most pernicious problems, because it's basically somebody takes your Android code, which you can on Android. It's not as locked down as the Apple side. They decompile it. They reuse most of it, let's say 95% of your code, and then they add some special sauce, right? They add some type of malware or tracker or something like that. And so we started out with that in terms of can we distinguish or classify repackaged applications from normal. Some things that kind of separate us from maybe other people that do work in the area with images. We were interested in what type of features of the image might be useful for classification. And we've actually looked at kind of three: cover histogram. That's got, like I say, your cover frequency distribution within any image. Something called Herabic texture features, which, as the name describes, is a way mathematically to describe the texture, right, of objects. And there's all kind of different features that are computable based off of the image for that. And then something called hue moments. And like I say, there's just some examples of images there. They're different version of a hue moment based on variations within them. Another thing, if you're going to do image-based analysis that you might want to consider, or we did at least, we thought it was of interest, is how you lay out the data, so to speak. And like I say, if you're dealing with an image, you have to have a width that you pick a size for. And then when you do, you're basically, your next row is going to be the next sequence of data that you encounter. And so traditionally, zigzag is how, well, if you don't do it row by row by row, where you start at the beginning every single time, locality has to do with the fact you're trying to group data that is near each other actually in the image. And so like a zigzag, for example, your last data point is to the right. And so your next data point should be right below that instead of going all the way back over the left. So again, practical kind of things when you think about image analysis. But we discovered that along the way and kind of put that into our studies. We've done several studies in this area. I'll just kind of just highlight one of them, like I say, just for time. We're definitely focused on determining what the best mixture of Herabic histogram and hue moment features are. Obviously, images are better suited to probably be ran through convolutional neural networks. They typically get greater performance in those versus traditional classifiers. And we're actually curious, are there other features of the image that we haven't thought of that might be useful? But those tend to be what you would call a global feature of the image. And so a lot of our studies have just been experimental. We just want to know whether it works or not. I had a particular interest on whether color matters. What got us in this area was, almost probably a decade or so ago, people who took x86 code, converted them into image form, got very great performance early on with detecting malware, x86 malware. That kind of got us going down this road of what other things might image-based representation be good at. So I say, kind of one of the last studies we did in this area, we looked at seven different classifiers. Some things that we walked away from that. A lot of our experiments resulted in about 99% accuracy. Best classifier varied based off some of the data sets and different questions we were asking. In this particular study, we did kind of verify that color could outperform grayscale, which in traditional, like I say, x86 malicious binary, grayscale is going to be your best bet. So I've always been intrigued by what might be different ways to colorize the data that you're looking at. And then the spatial locality questions that we were asking of different ways to do that actually wound up being inconclusive. So this kind of example, just typical research. You ask questions you don't know the answer to. You try some things, see what you get, and that helps you, form some of your next questions you look at. We're also looking at how transformers are being used. If you're not familiar, these are obviously the deep learning architectures that are part and parcel with natural language processing. You get things like multi-head attention mechanisms, things like that come with transformer models. But obviously, transformers are the foundation of things we think of as Chat GPT and other large language models now. But these are basically CNN neural networks. We got a lot of things out there. We adapted some of those. One of the things we discovered, if you're dealing with a natural language type approach, and you're looking at binary code, do you just treat the binary as binary, or do you try to treat it as text, something that's text? So what we discovered is actually we would get better results if we actually decompiled a binary, or at least disassembled it to assembly level. We'd get better results than just running it the original binary as binary, instructions. Like I say, we had about an 85% accuracy on one of our first studies we looked at. So this is ongoing work. And we've got, like I say, several other questions that we're looking at in terms of integrating transformers. Malbert, if you're not familiar, there is already a transformer model out there called Malbert that combines BERT, which, if you're familiar with NLP, BERT is a well-known type approach. Here was another study that we've done. This was with androids. If you're not familiar with androids, you can actually gather system statistics from a running android. This involves all kinds of things you can think of: CPU, frequency, power, temperature. That's what we mean by system statistics. Some people would call them health statistics of a device. Basically, we wanted to know whether we could use machine learning classifiers using these type of statistics to classify malware. We actually got great accuracy based off of the 4 different experiments we set up with the underlying data sets, around 99%. And it kind of opened up, like I say, a new area, a study for us with just doing kind of dynamic analysis of malware. And like I say, if you're not familiar with system statistics, that's just kind of a big list of the kind of things you can collect for data. Like I say, loading average, I/O, disk read, memory usage, all of these things went into kind of our data sets, and we kind of did some analysis on what features produce the best results. Rootkit detection has been something of interest to us. So obviously, if you're familiar with rootkits, these are basically stealth malware. They run at administrator level privilege. Very hard to detect in some cases because they have the ability to lie to you. So we've looked at kind of what you would call side channel approaches for detecting them. So trying to get underneath, trying to gain the high ground essentially. So you can't fool physics. So in that kind of regard, we started out with something called system call frequency, which you have a better chance of measuring that unaltered from a rootkit that's maybe trying to fiddle with that in the underlying operating system. But certainly, if you're in a virtual environment, you can measure system call frequency outside of a VM that might be infected by a rootkit, essentially. And just to give you, I won't go into the full details of this, but what we did discover is with some combination of system calls, and if you're not familiar with the system call, these are higher level versions of assembly that are utilized by an operating system at the administrator level. They're part and parcel of how the OS does things. And you think about file opens, file reads. There's all these different kind of categories for them. We were able to find an optimal set of calls that produce pretty high accuracy in terms of detecting anomalous behavior from the rootkit. And like I say, I think recurrent neural networks was the best performing neural network that we had in that study. Kind of in the same vein of what you would think of as side channel analysis, we've been looking a lot at power. And so what we're talking about really is voltages that are measurable inside the internal workings of a PC. We focused on motherboard power in particular, but obviously you could outfit almost any device on a PC with specific power monitoring, whether it's the disk drive, network card, things like that. That's maybe part of some future work that we're looking at. But this, like I say, whether you're dealing with a native operating system or a cloud computing environment, what it allows you to do is essentially get underneath the influence of the rootkit completely, because you're dealing with physical properties that are very, 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 be almost near impossible to alter. I'm not saying someone hasn't tried it yet, but definitely it gives you a much higher ground for detecting anomalies at that level. We ran almost about 15 different machine learning models, wound up creating our own hybrid ensemble neural network based off that initial study. And basically playing around with some options that we had in there, wound up with producing very high accuracy for detecting rootkits. And we experimented with about three. These were Ubuntu and Windows type rootkits, Azazel, KBeast, Futo, things of that nature. And we still got a lot of ongoing work in this area that we think shows a lot of promise for actually practical technology. Now for something completely different, in the era of software vulnerabilities, if you're familiar with what a vulnerability is, we're talking about buffer overflows, SQL injection, cross-site scripting, something that's inherent in the code that somebody takes advantage of, creates an exploit for. These are the source of most of our data breaches that cause millions of dollars of loss and damage and everything else right now. So basically, most software vulnerability detection, we use analyzers, static analyzers. So you're talking about Fortify, all these commercial analyzers that are out there. You pay money for. Really, what we know in practice is that they're not very effective with large code bases. You have to have a lot of expert knowledge to basically encode what it is you're looking for. They're very slow to adopt to new vulnerabilities. That got us going down this road is let's see what people are doing in this area with machine learning. We started out with basically trying an image-based approach, and we decided that we would take, originally we were interested in, well, let's look at the compiler tool chain and what gets produced at different areas. And so we started basically with the tokenizer. So this is, if you ran source code through a Lexer, the Lexer, produces a stream of tokens from your original language statements. We started with that and basically converted that into an image form. We actually got pretty decent results using this approach, using the Lex source code. It kind of excited us. We didn't know what type of results we were going to get, and it wound up actually being rather good. But it does, you do have to have obviously source code access, which if you're in the development process, you do, right? The whole point of secure programming is to eliminate the vulnerabilities before they go out the door. So this would be something you integrate as part of normal development environments. What we've done since then is actually look at applying something called named entity recognition. We don't have a published paper on that. We've got a preprint out there on that one, but we've actually found much higher, even better results looking at C language and PHP code that's available in some of the published data sets that are used for analyzing strength of static analyzers. And like I say, there's just one of the some of the results from that in terms of our approach. We had a lot of very high, like in the 90% range, close to 100 in terms of AUC, precision and recall with the approach that we came up with in terms of binary classification, yes, no. I would say the golden kind of question is not only can you detect whether there's a vulnerability, but what kind of vulnerability is there? That's the multi-class classification. So that's actually where we begin exploring named entity recognition, and that's really where we found very high classification results using NER techniques in terms of how we analyze the source code to start with. And just to finish up, another approach, another aspect, something you would call system attestation. So this is where, we have a lot of systems out there. They get routine updates that are supposed to be, highly configured, highly controlled. A lot of this has a lot of, ramifications, especially within the DoD world or critical infrastructure. But what we came up with is essentially a image-based approach for being able to tell you whether something meets the spec or meets the expectation of what you would expect something to be loaded onto a controlled system. And this could be done essentially at a containerized level or basically a whole disk level, either one. And so we could, basically also do multi-classification in terms of telling you what your server version was, what version you're currently at, whether a patch has been applied, or whether it's infected or not. That's what most people are probably would want to know. But again, it's another example of image-based representation and then using a machine learning classifier to help you detect. I'll kind of finish this out with a discussion of something called nonlinear phase-space analysis. This may be something you've never heard of. If you've come from the physics or engineering world, you're probably familiar with dynamical theory or chaos theory. And it's the study of systems through a dynamical systems lens. And basically, in that area, physicist engineers they use a lot of techniques to really help them understand behavior of systems. That's really what it boils down to. And there, on that side, there are a lot more kind of theorem-based ways that you can look at analyzing system behavior. We take advantage of one called Tocken's theorem, and really, the whole idea is to be able to reconstruct what is called a phase space. And a phase space is basically a space in which all the possible states of a system are represented over some period of time. It's not, you can't take it over like, a month. You got to take kind of small segments of time. But within that time, you could create a phase space. And so the idea is that if you collect data about a system, certain data can help you reconstruct this phase space, right? And this basically, we call that maybe time series data. It's very fascinating. It's not my main area of strength, but we have found a lot of applications for applying this in a cybersecurity context, and I'll mention two in terms of rootkit detection and network intrusion. I started this work with Dr. Biography. He's a retired research scientist now from Oak Ridge. Basically, the whole idea is being able to predict or detect adverse events. And so it looks at the system as being in certain states. And so some states are good, they're normal. And then some states enter into unhealthy states or abnormal states that are bad. You think about a bridge, bridge failure, mechanical failure. You essentially have underneath the covers a change in the phase space or a change in the system state. So these approaches are meant to detect or warn you of those type of changes in the system. And it is fundamentally an anomaly detection problem. This is really what we're kind of talking about in terms of the methodology, is you have some type of time series data. You perform really what you would call a nonlinear transformation on it. And the way that we do this, we're not, definitely there's a lot of people that do work in the phase space area outside of security mostly. But what we focus on is the reconstruction of the phase spaces. And basically what that results in is what you would call a phase space graph, right? So we're talking about a mathematical graph. This is a set of nodes and edges. And so we have, instead of this time series data, we break the time series data up in smaller chunks, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes at a time. And so every little chunk we break it up into becomes a phase space graph. Currently, our main method is using what we would call graph dissimilarity. So this is where you're asking the question of how graphs change over time, how similar or dissimilar they are over time. And that basically is the basis for either detecting an anomaly or predicting an anomaly in the future. So that's kind of like the big picture of it. And this is just an example of what some time series data would look like if I broke it up into smaller chunks and then did a nonlinear transformation on it. You would have this sequence of phase space graphs. And just to kind of, as the high level of this, it basically reshapes the anomaly detection problem into a graph similarity or dissimilarity problem, which is kind of why I like working in it. And so when you're dealing with graph dissimilarity, you're really dealing in the area of how do you describe two graphs to start with. And that gets into all kind of things that are really mathy, really good for people who study graph theory on the math side. But you deal with things like eigenvalues and connectivity and centrality measures, link and node properties, and things along those lines. That's really what you're talking about when you're talking about how do you know whether two graphs are similar or not. Again, this is kind of like a big picture of how we kind of do this nonlinear transformation. We have a few things that kind of separate some of our work, even in the phase space, the nonlinear area. Dr. Hobby created a filter many years ago that he got a patent off of. I think his original work in this area, he probably had about 15 patents that came out of Oak Ridge in his time that he was there. But basically what it help would do is eliminate noise, which is a common problem, especially if you're dealing, with anything of a side channel nature in terms of power, temperature, noise. That's kind of, I would say, one of the good things that's included in this work is the ability to deal with noise in the data to start with. We do some normalization, like I say, after we filter artifacts out of the data. That's really what symbolization is. It's binning essentially the data. And then this is where really the nonlinear transformation takes place. Calkin's theorem is actually based on something called time delay embedding theory. And the idea that instead of a single data point, what you have is a single data point and also data points that are in the future. That's the best way I like to think of it. So now every point is not only where you're currently at, but where the system has gone at some fixed interval in the future. So you wind up with essentially this vector, this array of values that represents any given point in time. And so we represent each of those vectors as a node. And then we do a second time delay embedding where we link two nodes at a fixed interval, and those become links. And so if, as if you've taken, discrete math, a graph is a set of nodes and links or edges and vertices. And so that's how we arrive at a phase-space graph. And at that point, we can apply graph theorems to help us with the analysis and make kind of stronger conclusions about the underlying theory of what we're doing. Just to give you an idea of some things we've used this for, rootkit detection. So not only have we done traditional machine learning analysis on rootkit detection, we've also used the nonlinear algorithm on it. And like I say, this is involved Unix, Linux machines. Most of our rootkit studies involve different load profiles, normal, manual, stressed. I'm pretty much of the conclusion at this point that probably a benchmark stress program of some type is probably the best way, especially for rootkits. It's very hard for a rootkit to hide in that environment because most rootkits add code to what they're doing to hide their tracks. And anytime you run more code, you're going to run more CPU cycles and you're going to draw more power or voltage. But anyway, we have basically like a data collection environment that allows us to get different voltage channels. We sample this at about 1,000 hertz. That's 1,000 samples per second. It's not high frequency data collection. And so, like I say, you can use a multimeter. We use a little bit more advanced resistor type setup for this in terms of the data collection device we used. We got some very good results in our first study. Most of the phase-space work involves training the algorithm. There are some parameters you have to assign values to, just like with machine learning. So we're trying to essentially optimize those parameters to essentially what produces the best reproduction of the phase space, right? The system dynamics. That's really what the goal is. And so the better you reproduce the system dynamics, the better a detection or prediction algorithm is going to be able to tell you, hey, there's an anomaly present or anomaly is coming down the road. Now, with rootkits, you can't predict a rootkit, malware, it's either running or it's not. So these are all detection questions. When you talk about mechanical systems, biological systems, those have a prediction factor involved because those systems change state up into the point of failure. But basically, just as this study, we ran 3,300 different settings of those variables called a parameter set. Out of those, about 2,100, 2,200 of those had a perfect true rate. So that's what we call a zero detection distance. And we were able to kind of see, in general, probably the 5-volt channel performed a little bit better than the other two based off different rootkits we were running. And the other kind of thing that we optimize is how long does it take you to detect? All of these detections were almost within, with the hour being the closest time chunk we could use, it was all within the first hour. And then I mentioned graph features. What we also were able to determine is that we only needed one graph feature out of the ones that we got perfect detection on instead of having to have 13, 14, 15 different graph features. That matters for processing time. Okay, and then I'll finish out with this. So we just finished a study on this of applying nonlinear algorithm to network intrusion. We used one of the popular data sets from the Canadian Institute for Cybersecurity, the IDS 2018 one. If you're not familiar, this is actually produced from their flow meter, which takes packets in PCAP form. It gives you a network flows, and then it gives you a summary of 62 different network features for every flow. So you've got this big, huge spreadsheet, got 62 columns by network flow, and it just keeps going down. So it's kind of like, I would call it like metadata of the actual PCAPs or the packets themselves. So we picked 20 out of those 62 possible network features, and that was just a guess. We said, hey, let's pick the ones that might have the greatest chance to be more successful with the detection algorithm. That was kind of our approach. We did some pre-processing with all that, including some normalization. That created, like I say, sets of data we ran through our nonlinear phase-space algorithm, and that gave us results of how good we did. In the end, what we did discover is that every feature we tried at least had a result in terms of the parameters that we trained them on. We trained 1,000 parameters for every feature. We wound up getting perfect detection on two of the different network features. So true rate of 1, there's the receiver operating curve. So you can think of detection distance as a way to combine specificity and sensitivity into one value. But basically, we were very happy with the result. No one's ever done this before. It's very novel. We tried it to see if it would work. I actually didn't expect it to, and it did. So what that maybe kind of hints to us is that maybe networks act as a chaotic system or a dynamical system, just like PCs. Other things that other folks in the physics world have already said, yeah, PC is a dynamical system. So maybe network traffic is essentially a dynamical system in that sense too. And like I say, we did a study on which graph features. We looked at about 15 or 16 different graph features that we basically looked at combinatorially, all of them combined, every combination of them to see which one produces the best result. Didn't really find a clear trend of which graph feature matched which network feature. But there were a few that we saw were very common in all of the best results that will kind of help guide some of our future results. All right, and then just to let you know where we're going with this, we've used NOPSA on a lot of different data domains. I've done a lot of things in the biomedical area with seizure prediction and detection, for example. I'm looking at turbulence prediction right now. So I'm very excited to apply this to as many different data domains. I think the algorithm, that's the strength of it, is you can apply it. Same algorithm, we change very little in terms of the algorithm depending on the data domain because it's got this underlying thought behind it. You're dealing with the physics, the dynamics of a system as it changes over time. But once you do this nonlinear transformation, like I say, you wind up with graphs. So almost all of our work so far has been based off what we call graph dissimilarity. And our algorithms are based off what are called thresholding or successive occurrences. And we're basically saying, if we kind of set a bar, when does the system go above that bar in terms of this graph feature? And how long is it there before we say, hey, you've got something wrong. You've got an anomaly, or an anomaly is going to happen in the future if you're, like say, a bio or a mechanical system. You could also take those graphs and do something called mu subgraph thresholding. And if you do that approach, you actually don't have to have what we call base cases. Most anomaly detection, you have to measure normal in some way to compare abnormal against. If you do something like this, what you're essentially doing is you're letting the graph features themselves tell you that the system's changing without having to know even what normal looks like. You just know that it's changed fundamentally. You could also take those graphs, run them through what's called a graph neural network, which is a form of convolutional neural network. We've got an active study in that right now. And then we've also tried running the graphs, the phase-space graphs, through traditional classifiers like a support vector machine. We basically, in almost both those two cases, with applying machine learning on that side, showed that we could improve the detection or prediction result by using a machine learning classifier versus graph dissimilarity. So what that means for us is we probably get reduced processing time for training and for the operational version of whatever the detector or the predictor is. All right. Well, I try to keep it within 30 or so, but a little over. But that's all I have to say. I'll take anybody's questions, and thank you again for letting me talk today.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tar, for the fantastic presentation and sharing for all these different studies. That was fascinating. So we'll room for questions now. Folks who are listening, could you place your questions on the chat? Maybe I'll start with first question, maybe. You talked about this, I think the graph dissimilarity. That was very interesting work in combining the nonlinear using that. So did you compare the graph-based approaches with other non-graph methods for anomaly detection? I saw SVM there, but did you compare how was the performance?
So the first study we did on this was from a biomedical. We were looking at seizure prediction, and what we discovered. So one of the issues with the nonlinear side is you got to train the algorithm. It's like machine learning. It's like everything. That tends to be computing intensive. Depending on the parameters, the values you pick for the variables, it influences the size of the graphs. And of course, the bigger graphs you have, the more computing intensive the calculations are. That's just, part, graph dissimilarity is an intractable, it's an NP complete problem. so, so everything we do is a heuristic anyway, right? So what we discovered with that one is we could have the face-based algorithm could produce graphs. Our traditional approach with graph dissimilarity maybe wasn't that great. Maybe it would be more like, let's say 90%, 85% accuracy. But then if you took the graphs and ran them through like, for example, support vector machine, we showed that we could actually get the accuracy to 100. And so that was kind of our first approach at that. And what we're discovering maybe with graph neural networks and the first studies we've done with that is very similar. We took we ran an experiment where we created face-based graphs, and the parameters we chose was around, let's say, 80% accuracy. And so what we're seeing with that with some of the initial studies is we can get that up to 95% accuracy with using a graph neural network on the face-based graph. So I think that's got a lot of promise in terms of reducing training time for this approach. And then it really simplifies it because producing the face-based graphs is not very computationally intensive at all, right? It's pretty fast because you're
Cool.
just converting data into a different form essentially. So that's kind of, I think, got the most promise for the future and where we're going with it. So I'm kind of really excited about that. See where it goes in the next few years.
Yeah, thank you. I think, in fact, all these smaller chunks of these graph snippets could also be sent to another graph neural-based networks to really to figure out another classification problem.
Yes, exactly.
And you talked about on token level, software level based vulnerability detection. Could you remind me about what do you refer as token? Could you
So,
maybe
so when I say token, so think about source code. Most compilers, pretty much all compilers, the first phase is the vector, which basically just takes a sequence of characters and produces a sequence of tokens. And the token is just a categorization of a set of characters or a sequence of characters. So you think about it, you've got a token for the while statement, you've got a token for the if statement. You have a token for integer constants or integer values. You have a token for real valued things. So yeah, you're taking that stream of tokens and then running that through your machine learning system versus taking the source code itself. So and what we discovered off that, like I say, for binary classification, we took that token stream and then converted it into image form. So, but that's what I mean by token. It's basically what would come out of a scanner or Lexer once you put the source code through it.
super. And you talked about this zero cyber competition, right? Is this targeted towards high school or this is more undergrad? What is it?
So day zero, that is our college. It's mostly school computing students. Every now and then I get maybe an engineering student on the team, but it's basically school computing students and mostly undergrads. But it's the student organization, the club that participates in the traditional collegiate cyber defense competition, collegiate penetration testing. Uh, Department of Energy has DOE Cyber Force. That's an annual competition. There's some major ones that are out there that most clubs participate in. So that's that's what that works about.
Super. We also run a cyber competition and a conference. I'll send you some invitation for our October event.
Okay.
So maybe
Yes, please
the
do.
yeah. Let's see. The SFS scholarship program. Do you have a good number of students over there? I'm just curious to see how many students are participating in that.
We currently have 8 in the cohort, and the number varies from year to year because students graduate. But we've had anywhere from 10 to 15 in the cohort per year. So typically, our grants we have around 20 scholarships over the. It's basically a 7-year period for each grant. So we have at least 20 scholarships, and sometimes we can get more out of that depending on some are 2 year, some are 3 year scholarships. So sometimes we can add an extra one in there depending on where we're at. But yeah, right now we're at 8. We had a few graduate, but we typically run around 10 in the cohort.
Do you
And
have any kind of,
go ahead.
yeah, go ahead. Sorry, I
I
was
was just going to
just
say we'll have our last kind of for this current grant cycle fall. Uh, we can basically offer 2 year master's scholarships at this point because of the time period of the grant. But normally you get a renewal. If you get renewed, then you can, like I say, we've supported PhD students in the program with it. You can get up to 3 years of funding, and sometimes we can support an undergrad student in their senior year that goes into the master's program. But yeah, we mostly target master students for it.
good. I think I was about to ask this. Do you have any kind of forensic or any test bed that you have in your lab or in your school that maybe you talked about a lot of malware-based data sets. I'm just curious to see if we have to work with find a partnership in terms of proposals development. I'm trying to see synergies in terms of the resources what you guys have and how I can able to connect.
Yeah, so we've got a I'll call it kind of like a hardware assurance lab that we've been building for a while now. Even though we're a school computing, like I say, we've had a lot of me myself that have brought a little bit more hardware interest into it, and so that's allowed us to do things kind of more in what you call the side channel area. So we have a lab, for example, with a side channel analyzer that we got off of an NSF grant years ago, an MRI grant. We started to acquire some additional equipment that would allow us to actually do some physical reverse engineering on circuit level, component level type things. That's highly unusual for school computing. But we do share the building with our College of Engineering. And so
Sure.
if we ever need help, we go borrow somebody. We do have a forensics lab. It's got a very, I wouldn't say it's very big, but we do have one of the traditional kind of ICS SCADA tables that's got a PLC. We've not done a lot of research around it to date, but we typically use it for demonstrations and things like that. But we've had it, but we haven't taken probably full advantage of it.
Super. Thank you, Todd. I think that's all we have for questions for today. Thank you so much for your time for this webinar. You will receive a nice plaque from UND and also a letter or certificate from our dean's office. So I think I appreciate for taking the time to do this, and I'll happy to also do one at your university whenever we can find a schedule.
Right. Excellent.
Yeah.
I'll look forward to
Super.
that, and I'll keep in touch with you. And it's good to meet y'all, and then glad to learn a little bit about what y'all are doing as well. And we'll stay in touch and look at for some opportunities. Like I say, I think me and you became an R at the same time, a CAR. So
Yeah.
we'll do some collaboration and get some points along the way. So
Yes, I am all for it. Let's work on those collaborative proposals with NSA or other calls. I think
yeah,
I think I learned a lot from you. Thank you. Take
sounds
care.
good. All right. Well, thank y'all again for inviting me.
Yeah.
All right.